Hi, I'm Jon Atack. I am absolutely delighted to welcome my good friend Karen de la Carrière to the show. Hi, Karen.
Jon, huggies.
Likewise.
Good to see you.
Yeah, always is, always is. And let's just make a quick point here that, no, let's not. Well, I've been interested since we first were in touch, and it's about 7 or 8 years ago that we were first in touch. You know, you rose to a stellar position in Scientology, one of only 8 class 12 case supervisors. How many are still alive from that 8? How many are still? Are any of them still in Scientology?
Well, I know of 8 of them that died off in recent years.
The class 12s, yeah.
Yes. And the fact is that they are doping off while auditing.
Yeah.
I was told that there are a lot of complaints that they're falling asleep while charging $1,500. Now, Jon, if you do the same thing every day, no day off, no exercise time allowed, not allowed to clear your head and run to the beat, not just the same, and you're auditing the same commands year in and year out, I do believe a dope off will occur. You just can't be a parrot and a robot year in and year out without falling asleep. Do you agree with me?
I think there's something I realized years ago is that in many forms of hypnotherapy, and Scientology is a way of guiding the imagination, so it fits in most of it with hypnotherapy. What happens is that the therapist puts the person into a trance state. In Scientology, the auditor goes into a trance state too, because you're repeating things, you're having to do the same procedures over and over, and you're also expected to do the impossible, which is to give 100% of your attention to the person sitting opposite to you while looking at the e-meter, dealing with the tone arm, writing notes and looking at questions. And actually, that's not humanly possible. You can't. You've got to divide your attention. So I remember being audited by Richard Rees when he was doing Van Morrison in the morning and me in the afternoon, because we were the 2 really difficult people, I suppose. And Richard was the senior case supervisor UK at the time. And it was like being audited by a piece of wood. There was no empathy, there was no feeling. It had all gone. And I felt so sorry for him because he's such a bright man. So yeah, doping off, falling asleep, how anybody manages this stuff. And you're entering this same kind of strange dream world with the pre-clear, where you're both pretending that there'll be supernatural powers just around the corner. And I remember the great disappointment at getting onto the operating Thetan levels after 7 years of thinking that people could read my minds and do all these things. And you're going, it's a con. Nobody here's got any superpowers. It's just this desperate sort of, and rather childish thing that we got involved in, and we decided to believe, that we descended from clams and sloths and that kind of stuff. But I am fascinated by your career. How did you get into Scientology? How did it start for you? What was the first approach?
Jon, I know that you and I differ very much in certain ways of viewing life.
Yes, and fortunately.
There's no, we healthily debate. I do believe in reincarnation, which is an old Buddhist, Eastern Indian, it's Scientology.
I came from a year in Zen Buddhism into Scientology, so I believed in reincarnation. I believe in Scientology. I don't believe in anything anymore.
Yeah.
I don't believe.
Let's say I believe in the immortality of the soul, whether you incarnate or. I mean, all of Christianity believes you live on and you rise again when this return. So it's a belief of many people. So I strongly believe that. And I would get flashing memories that really I couldn't account for. I would get stuck pictures in my mind of someone behind prison bars lurching forward like an alligator to throttle my neck. And I remember being, where does this come from? I've never even seen a prison or prison bars. Or I would recognize, one day I was in Switzerland in my late teens, and I knew when I turned the corner there would be a lake, and then it would go uphill, and I knew that. And I'd never been in Switzerland. So these freaky, whatever you want to call mystical things, how could I know the geographical location? So when I was reading bits and pieces and Scientology agreed with what I fervently believed, and here was a group that could not only held that belief, but would give you Dianetics to make you explore these memories. Oh, this was a natural for me.
Okay.
I didn't need too much persuasion. So it was the agreement of that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And also I had a boyfriend he was very Fairburn. Wonder what happened to him. He, we were dating, and he said, look, Karen, he wanted to be kind. He didn't want to say, you're too uptight for me. He said, if you want a relationship with me, you got to get auditing. Now, that's when I started studying a little bit. That's when I thought, oh my, reincarnation. Woo! So it was just very fast.
I was fascinated by, but because as I say, I came from a Buddhist group, and I was fascinated by the exploring past lives and finding that sort of thing out. And it's a disappointment to me in Scientology that I've yet to meet anybody, and I've interviewed more than 1,000 people who are involved with Scientology by now, who could actually say, I can speak in 13th century French, or I can point you to this thing. And I have a friend Rex Basterfield, who helps us with the videos, and he was involved quite briefly for less than a year. That had a profound and devastatingly negative effect upon him, I must say. But because he believed in this so much, he actually figured out this town where he'd lived, and he wrote down all sorts of details and over time, and eventually he and his wife went there, and he was very disappointed that none of it was as he'd seen it. And he then looked the town up historically, and it hadn't existed at the time, he thought. And there's no real effort other than the bizarre book Mission into Time. There's no real effort to actually prove the truth of any of this. So it becomes a kind of romance, and it's a romance that I shared. As I say, I'm an agnostic. I'm not somebody who doesn't, I don't disbelieve. I don't believe or disbelieve. I don't see the necessity. Philosophically, I follow Dengsu, and I don't know what happened before I was born. I don't know what's going to happen after I die. I'm really happy where I am now. It doesn't worry me anymore. So who cares? But I understand that it's a particular drive. For me, the drive was, I was 19, I'd had a relationship fall apart. I'd gone off to Toulouse to play drums in a band, got stuck there for 6 months, almost starved, got back, found the girl I'd been living with had run off and disappeared. And then I found that she was shacking up with a friend of mine and was way off to New Zealand. And I got, that kind of 19-year-old romantic collapse that goes on, and picked up Science of Survival at a friend's house one day. And this friend was really into the Incredible String Band. So he'd gone to the library and got this book, couldn't make head nor tail of it, left it lying around. I read book 1 of Science of Survival and went, yeah, attention units, that's what it must be, stuck attention units and this sort of thing. But I really, longed to explore these past lives, and nothing that real happened to me during auditing. And it was funny, very funny talking with Otto Rose about the auditing that he gave to Hubbard and the amount of lying that Hubbard did in the auditor's chair. It's in the pre-clear's chair. So that when Otto found out about Ron's real war story, and we've absolutely got it documented, you know, chapter and verse. Chris Owen has worked even further than I did, and Russell Miller did. We have no doubts about our account of Hubbard's war. He did not see combat, but he would sit in session and tell Otto about all of these battles he'd fought in. You know, it's just this terrible fiction. So wouldn't it have been great if there'd been a real mission into time that had actually found something? Been talking with Hannah Whitfield, who was the captain of the mission into time. You know, she said they found a few bottle tops and things, but the Phoenician gold that he was looking for, none of it was actually there. So there is that allure to Scientology that you think you're going to get past life therapy, but there's no attempt to, you know, rigorously check it, which would have been a wonderful thing to do. You know, if somebody could pick up a manuscript written in 9th century Chinese and just read it to you because they were able to go back to that lifetime, but didn't seem to happen.
Well, you know, I'm going to give you a pro and con on this.
Sure, yeah.
Anyone who Googles child reincarnation, child remembers last life, there are hundreds of videos.
Oh,
these
yeah.
are different families, and these children clearly remember their last death, what happened. Psychologists and universities have checked it out by going to that spot, and sure enough, there was a record of an intersection where a shooting at blah blah blah. So there's, you know, there's pros and there's for every for every incident you can give me where this was rubbish, there are hundreds of those. However, let me tell you something to your side of the argument.
Sure.
As a case supervisor, hundreds of cases came before my desk for me to supervise. And in the years I was senior CS Celebrity Center for a year and a half. Then I was the LCS, Class 12 CS, for a couple of years. In all the years I was CSing, here, wait for it. In the hundreds of folders that came across my desk, some 5,000 cases said they were Jesus in a last lifetime.
They were all body thetans of Jesus, you know, I mean, it's easy.
Okay, at least 2,000 said they were Julius Caesar being, assassinated. At least 1,500 said they were Cleopatra, the Queen Cleopatra. At least 2,000 said, or more, 2,500 parents said their newly born son was Quentin Hubbard. Somehow they wanted to attach themselves to the family. I'm just giving you, about 1,100 people said they were Mozart or Beethoven or Bach. So as a CS, when you see this, just imagine my mind viewing. So I'm giving you both sides of the coin. One is the hundreds of testimonials on YouTube of children who have total recall. And then when you're CSing, you see the absolute urge to at least say you were famous previously, even if you're not anyone of consequence, particularly this lifetime. I'm just throwing that at you.
Yeah, let me give you some pros and cons on the same thing. Because it's a subject that's fascinated me, I've investigated tens of cases that have been put forward over the years, particularly after I left Scientology. So back in the 1980s, I became very interested. And let's start with, testimonials. Unless I'm with Jesus, unless you can put your fingers in the holes, then I'm a doubting Thomas. I don't believe it because somebody says it's true, because they say they've checked it. So there's a book by a doctor who checked various Indian cases, and was absolutely convinced by these cases. The problem is seeing how easy it is to con somebody, seeing how easy it is to trick somebody. So the best single account that I've read was written by a psychiatrist in Bristol called Dr. Arthur Guirdham. I think it's Guirdham. The book is called We Are One Another. And he was an atheist. I think he was an atheist. And the first client who came to him said that she remembered being a member of the Albigensians, the Cathars, in the Languedoc region of what is now France, but at the time was an independent province. And they were the first people to be exterminated by the Catholic Church. But the Inquisition was in fact formed by Innocent III in the 12th century with the specific aim of killing every member of the Cathar sect, because their beliefs, I mean, they would later on, the Nazis actually somehow managed to think they were related to the Cathars, which is a ridiculous idea. It took a long time to get rid of them. Anyway, he had somebody come along and she had these vivid memories, and he's a psychiatrist. He's like, okay, fine. And he made a note of what she was saying. And he happened to be going on holiday to the Languedoc, but around the region of Toulouse, the south of France, just with Spain, Pyrenees between it and Spain. Lovely place where I got stuck when I was a teenager. And he found a guy who for the first time was opening some of the records, a historian. And the names that this woman had given to him were in the records. So that's the kind of proof I like. When he got home, another person who didn't know this woman came to him and was also, it would seem, a member of the Cathars, the Albigensians at this time. And so it continued. He himself never had any experiences, but he had a number of people, and he started getting this idea, maybe they're reborn together and what have you. That's the best evidence I've seen. Without, having become very skeptical, seeing the way that, say, Uri Geller managed to fool so many people. My friend Yuval Law, we gave a talk at a conference in Riga, and this was a conference for an umbrella group called Thekris, which deals with counter-cult stuff. So you've got people in the room who'd spent 30 and 40 years helping cult members, and yet when Yuval bent a spoon, there was a palpable gasp in the room. Now, I'd seen the way that he'd got a spoon handle and a spoon, and it's really not difficult. So, seeing how readily people can be persuaded, or somebody like, say, Madame Blavatsky, who had such a dreadful influence upon the 20th century. There's no Aryan race theory without Madame Blavatsky. That's where the Nazis got it from. And she was a liar, a cheat, a plagiarist, and a magician. So it requires very firm proof. And, that's where I live. We can prove things or not. I don't really mind what people believe. It really doesn't bother me, as long as their beliefs don't lead them to start wanting to harm others. And that can be a little bit of a problem with Scientology. So where did you first get into Scientology? Whereabouts in the world were you?
London. Let me just, with Clive and Barbara Hamilton. I don't know if you know them. They had a little mission. Clive and Barbara Hamilton classics. Just to finish off, when you said you can believe what you want to believe, you see, in Scientology, all the hierarchy, they can believe what they want to believe. They can believe in Zeno and the volcanoes and these evil psychiatrists that implanted and zapped. They can believe all that. The point is that they're in a position of power. And what they dole out to rank and file is incredibly harmful. This is not to do with whether they believe they have 400 million attached spirits clinging to their body, ETs. They then put out something that only they, by doing Scientology commands, can free you from these pesky attached spirits that inhabit your body, that are stuck to your nose and your ears, and only Scientology.
And anyone
pay them $7,500 for 12 and a half hours can free you from these. So it's not the belief, it's the ones in power that then throw out their authoritarian rules and regulations. That's the harmfulness part of it.
I couldn't agree more. And you've got this tremendous conflict that for me, one of the most important ideas in Scientology, it's not original Scientology, is in the Auditor's Code, the Code of a Scientology Counselor, it says you never evaluate for the pre-clear or tell them about their own case. And yet you're being told this thing happened with Xenu and the body counts. Even telling people that they've got engrams, traumatic incidents, violates that rule. And Scientology is about imposing a view upon you. It's not about a freedom of belief or disbelief. It's about saying, this is the way it is. If you disagree with Ron Hubbard, you won't become completely self-determined. And that just spins me, the idea that such a fundamental contradiction can exist, that rather than this being a way of you learning to explore things, that the only person who would ever be able to discover anything was Ron Hubbard, which is a proof that it doesn't work. Because, you know, and I tell the same story every time. From the Philadelphia Doctorate course, Hubbard talks about there are the pieces. They mustn't know the rules of the game. There are the players. They must hide the rules of the game. And that's only David Miscavige now. Then there's the game maker who doesn't have to follow the rules of the game. And boy, did Hubbard not follow the rules of the game, you know, and never felt he had to. And so we get into this bizarre situation where you're being liberated into a trap. You are being pushed into what I've called the total freedom trap, where as long as you're completely compliant, you'll be free. And it's sort of, well, I am free. I don't have to believe any of that. You know, I can pick and choose what I do and don't believe. And it means that, you know, for me, Scientology was very helpful because it did bring me to a point of what I call adulthood, where I make up my mind about what I think and feel, and where there's nobody punishing me and bullying me and threatening me in what has become the standard form of Scientology.
Yeah, that's because you that's because you were you.
Yeah, I became a grown-up. Most people don't.
I want to just quickly add in something that has been on the internet in the last 2-3 days, which is an important little anecdote, and I'm going to send Spike the picture. Hubbard gave out a very, very bad untruth,
Yeah.
fake, false. And you see, this is a picture sitting at his desk, and this is Hubbard. I never let anybody leave the Apollo after these L's unless they were stably exterior with full perception.
Well,
I'll tell you, right to this day, their money-making thing. People yearn, they think, wow, I can dance around and be in the stars. I can leave my body and have the Scientology is going to give me this wonderful, awesome transformation where I can just flip out of my body and look down from and go to Disneyland and maybe hover around in Las Vegas and watch an exciting craps table. This is and people buy and give them tens of thousands of dollars to do this. Yep. So I ran to marketing when this first came out in magazines. And I told marketing, look, for years and years, I've either audited the L's or CS the L's. And nobody ever had this, never mind stably, like you live on and on outside your body. I absolutely explain this in baby English till marketing, the execs got it. And you know what? They appeased and placated me. Oh, Karen, oh, this is vital data. Thank you so much for dropping into marketing. Karen, thank you. We so appreciate it. Then they did nothing. Nothing.
Yeah.
They did absolutely nothing. It was placating me. And they did nothing. And to this day, they lie that Scientology will give you exterior. It never happened. Wake up, world. Stop giving thousands of dollars to go exterior with full perception. I can't tell you how many people get in just on that fake claim.
Of course.
Doesn't happen, never happened. The nearest it happened was one guy had L11, and when he was at Tampa Airport, he was looking up at the lights, and faces appeared that grinned at him. I got to tell you this little anecdote. He had all these devilish faces, and instead of seeing lights, he saw these smiling evil faces. Kind of freaked. This was really real in his mind, and he rushed back to flag, and he told what they call DFP, the director of the processing area where you get the counseling. And he said this, and the DFP said, shh, don't go saying things like this. They'll make you an illegal PC. This is type 3, type 2. So he said, are you telling me to have a withhold from my own? Isn't that against, like, aren't you supposed to tell everything? And the DFP said, I'm just trying to save your flight experience. So he goes to you go on a routing form. Many people have to check off. He goes to ethics. And the ethics, he tells the ethics officer. And the ethics says, oh my God, please don't say this in session. Please. You're such a good client. You buy all these books from us. You buy all the CDs. You've already bought incredible amount of the materials. And we all love you because you keep buying and buying. Don't tell anyone that you saw devil faces at Tampa Airport. Both the ethics officer and DFP encouraged him to withhold and lie.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Now, there is a simple disproof of the notion of exteriorization in Scientology, whether it's to do with the lists or the promises that the early opening procedure by duplication is meant to lead to exteriorization. If Scientology was able to make people stably exterior from the body, then they would be able to do remote viewing. They'd be able to see things at a distance. If that had been possible, why on earth was the Guardian's office set up with branch 1 to steal documents when they could, all they needed to do was remotely view those documents? So rather than stealing a room full of documents, and having Mary Sue Hubbard and 10 other members of the Guardian's office sent to prison for burglary, breaking and entering, kidnapping, false imprisonment, if Scientology worked, those things wouldn't be necessary. What is more, if anyone in Scientology, if just one person in Scientology had had the superpowers that are promised, nobody would win a court case against Scientology. They would have had tax exemption in 10 minutes by getting into the mind of the tax commissioner. It just doesn't work. What's more, I don't know if I've told you this story. When Otto Roast was supervising Ron's auditing aboard the ship, there was a row between Mary Sue and Ron, where she was calling him a charlatan rather loudly. And he, in exasperation, yelled back at her, "What do I have to do to prove this works?" And Mary Sue said, "I've never been exterior." Now, she'd been involved since 1952, so you would have thought, maybe even 1951, you'd have thought by now something would have worked on her, as this is the principal objective of Scientology, to be 3 feet back of your head. So Hubbard summoned Otto Rose and said, right, Otto, find all of the exteriorization procedures. I think he found 90 and run them all on Mary Sue until she goes exterior. And after a few weeks, Mary Sue said, I can't take any more. And so and who wants to be out of their head anyway? Isn't that a bad thing, being out of your head? Who wants to be out of their mind? In normal society, these phrases mean crazy. And why would it be better to run your car from 3 feet behind rather than from inside it? Why is the idea of, and then he contradicts himself in History of Man and says, the body is in the thetan, so you're exterior anyway. But the whole purpose of Scientology from its inception in February 1952 was to get the thetan out of the body. Now, that sounds like somebody who's trying to run away from things to me. That sounds like somebody who's trying to blow. What was it that Hubbard had got against his body that he was so desperate to leave it? And why did he never exhibit any of these wonderful powers that we hear about? Most other gurus, Sai Baba, for example, in India, who had the ear of the Indian government, a Japanese film crew were filming from the side. And when somebody kneeled before Sai Baba, they'd feel this shock. And they filmed and found the wires. And there are so many of Hubbard didn't even seem to try and convince anybody that he had these powers. And we all got into this same little trap, which is going, I must have done something wrong, so it didn't work for me.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work. It's that simple.
By setting up that the elves are going to give you this, each person thinks my case was too heavy and I didn't get it, but others, they believe this. But I want to take it a step further on the greed and evil aspect of this. A guy who's been in touch with me almost wept that they took $70,000 for one L because it needed to be repaired. And even if whatever, he had to pay and pay and pay. So what he had saved for his bridge went on one L. And once they burned up his funds and he left, they never called him again. So there's a fraud here where they're pretending to give you some spirit. They are there to extract maximum money out of you. If they could get the gold out of your teeth, they would extract that as well.
And Hubbard says it. Hubbard says the governing policy of Scientology is make money, make more money, make others produce so as to make even more money. The governing policy of this religion is to make money, not to help mankind, but to make money. And boy, did he make money. And he, this story that always comes back to me is about La Quinta when the films were being made, and he decided that the crew shouldn't have toilet tissue. And so you hear these stories of people going out to phone boxes and taking the phone directories and all this. He, meanwhile, has a 24-track recording studio being built. He is ordering his shirts from Savile Row in London. He's having handmade Picoon cigarettes. We hear the same kind of things about David Miscavige, with his Blue Mountain coffee and his inhaler in one hand and his Camel cigarette in the other, just like Hubbard, an asthmatic who smoked. I mean, how could we ever have followed somebody who was stupid enough to have asthma and smoke cigarettes? But we did. 100 cigarettes a day, Hubbard,
Yeah. And also another dimension of this money, make money, make even more money is Hubbard absolutely wanted to avoid taxes.
Yes.
Wanted to avoid his own fair share, just like everybody pays their taxes or should pay their taxes. Hubbard set a trait, which is why one of the reasons people are hated in Clearwater is they're not paying their fair share of taxes. They pay some property tax. They're not paying once IRS gave them this tax exemption, they get off the hook in city after city. They use the police, they use the fire, they use, in fact, they use and play the system to pay for the medical for their staff and CO members. They make the government pay.
Yeah.
So not only do they not pay taxes and use all city services, state services, etc. So that alone causes locals to have a kind of...
And then when they find that the harassment that's being poured out against them by Scientology is tax-free, that Pat Broker was followed for 24 years at a cost of $11 million, tax-free. So they're like the mafia of religions, the Cosa Nostra religion,
Yeah, I've called them the Al Capone of religions because they use such thuggery. You've got to be in the seal to experience the thuggery.
Yes.
They So yes, there is they have a hunger for money. They desire your money. And they'll say anything. They'll lie. We'll give you exterior with full perception. Rubbish.
I know a guy who's
higher than me. As the class 12 CS, I was the pinnacle.
You saw it all.
Of tech training. There was no place to go higher. The buck stopped here on anyone who. And did I ever tell you about my 2 worst years in Scientology? Because of the greed. If I've told you this, stop me. I don't need to repeat it. Because of the greed, representatives in all kinds of cities called flag FSMs, flag
field staff
representatives, gathered up all people with money who were saying they made no case gain. And in every little city, Kansas City, Boston, Massachusetts, Phoenix, Arizona, any little satellite city, there's always a little cluster of people who make no gain, who complain, auditing didn't work on me, I'm not getting anywhere. Send them to flag.
Send them to
Give them money to the class 12 HEC.
Yeah.
So every day, the no case gains that auditing didn't work on, and there's always a percentage. Don't think auditing works on anyone and everyone. There's a percentage, maybe 20% in any given place, but that 20% don't always have a lot of boot, a lot of money, a lot of loot. They handpicked the ones that had money and sent them to me as the case supervisor of the class 12 HEC to case crack them. John, I don't know if I've told you that some of these people really belonged in institutions. They were suicidal. Did I tell you the story before?
We have had some conversation about it, and I think your claim is you're quite unusual in that one of the things that I tracked back in '93 when FactNet was being started, Bob Penny, who'd actually done all of the computer stuff, and Lawrence Wollersheim, who'd done the incredible promotion and the legal work for it, they came to me and said that they figured that the suicide rate was high in Scientology, and would I look at that? And I went away, and by my estimation, the suicide rate in Scientology is perhaps 100 times what it is in the outside world. It's very high indeed, because Scientology lies about the amount of members. The last actual verifiable internal report I saw, which was from the 1987, I think, I have it, printed report from inside, 25,000 fully paid members. What? We have 11 million members, 8 million members, 5 million members, 7 million members. They're counting the body thetans as well. That's how they do it. And so when you got a real number and you then looked at how many people had died that year, it was phenomenally high. And I chased, I think it was 38 cases. And just seeing these situations where people, because they've been promised, a very early example is John Neugebauer, commonly known as John Neuger, who was Helen O'Brien's partner. Helen O'Brien was the head of the Hubbard Association of Scientologists. She put on the Philadelphia doctorate course. No real doctors were harmed in making of the doctorate course, or indeed involved in the making of it. She got 38 people to pay $500 each to hear these lectures. And she gave everything to this. Neugebauer, during World War II, had been in the cleanup crews after the battles on the Pacific Islands. And his job was to bulldoze the bodies into the graves. And he had post-traumatic stress disorder and Hubbard, of course, promised him, no problem, in 10 hours, we'll be able to do this. And he just hung on and hung on and hung on. And all that auditing did for him was mean that he lived in these memories all the time. And there's very good work on post-traumatic stress disorder now that suggests that getting somebody to remember it and remember it and remember it isn't very good for them. It actually, as Scientology would say, makes the incident more solid. And so John Neugebauer committed suicide. And you've just got these lists of people in this brilliant way that Scientology has of, say, look at the book, Have You Lived Before This Life? If you get a first edition of that and you go through the names of the people involved, you realize why the later editions have those names edited out, because Cyril Vosper was one of the people who both audited and received auditing and would later write the mind benders about his experience in Scientology. So this, what George Orwell called throwing people down the memory hole is a very standard aspect of Scientology. Even if you look at the list of the first 10 real clears from 1965, starting with John McMaster, none of them are in Scientology still. In fact, when you go through the list, there's almost nobody who, has remained for any length of time. That you get a few poor old people who, as you say, are falling asleep while they're giving list 10, 11, or 12 for $1,500 an hour to people. It's a farce, but it shows how people can come to believe something crazy. Let me give you an example, because we were talking about authoritarian groups, of something crazy. There is this idea, and I think it's perhaps more persistent in the United States than anywhere else, that religion is a good thing. I had a friend who complained to me back in the 90s in LA, and he said whenever he mentioned Scientology to his family, they say, it's a religion. So I said, but Larry, the Thuggies were a religion. The Temple of Set, the Church of Satan, these are religions. Why is this word such a purr word, such a word that makes people think of good things? The Thuggies, or Thags, or thugs, it's where we get the word thug from, were an Indian sect that worshipped the black goddess Kali, the destroyer goddess, who's shown with a bunch of blood-dripping skulls as her skirt. Their religious practice was to capture strangers on the road and strangle them and steal their money. This is a religion, okay? They were, in the 1830s, when it finally became a problem, because the evil East India Company we were talking about before we came on air, because they'd gone in and brought the Raj in, which had some really bad things about it, which we are quite rightly complaining about, colonials and all of that stuff. But they did pick up that tens of thousands of people were being murdered every year by this religious group, the Thuggies, the Thugs. So, this idea that just something being a religion, we should protect people's right to believe, absolutely. I don't think we should protect hate speech. I don't think we should protect Scientology for having the vanity to believe that, as Hubbard said, anybody who's not a Scientologist is, and I quote, dead in the head.
Dead in the head.
Raw meat. because of this arrogant view that any other
Well,
spirituality is nonsense,
yeah, yeah. You mentioned goddess Kali. Did you
Yeah.
hear
The
about
Kali
the
ceremony.
Kali
Tell us about the
ceremony?
Kali ceremony. Go on.
Yes.
Everybody needs to know about this.
There was a ritual done on the flagship Apollo to punish auditors, counselors who had made a mistake. And there was an image of the goddess Kali and candlelight, and people had to take a mock knife and stab the picture to show how they were saboteurs. They weren't there to free people, they were killers of the beautiful tech that free. This was a daily ceremony done, and it truly, Monica Pignotti's account of it is best. I did not eyewitness this, but oh boy, the auditors buzzed and hummed about this. So it traumatized people that you had to. This was a ritual, a real ritual. And again, whoever ordered it, or whoever, I think Janis Grady in her book did attribute this to Hubbard's advices. Or I've got to look that up to be 100% sure of my facts. But nobody on a ship that was Hubbard's home would dream up and dare to do something in the internship room.
Well, let's face it, he had superpowers, so he knew what everybody was doing. Yeah.
Oh boy.
Famous time.
Well, not many people know that towards the end, as written in the book Going Clear, he said, "I failed."
To Sarge Fouth, yeah.
Yes, to Sarge.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think he wept, I think.
It happened frequently. The first account I have of it is actually in about December 1950, when he breaks down with his girlfriend, not the second wife that he didn't have, Sarah, but his girlfriend, Barbara Cloden, Barbara Snader,
yeah,
later become a psychologist, and lovely woman, just a really lovely woman who he proposed to, and she turned him down. But he got to this thing. It's like, I've got nothing left. Dianetics doesn't work. And of course, most Scientologists don't notice that in Science of Survival, he explains that Dianetics, the mental science of modern health, doesn't actually work. It's hypnotic, and you shouldn't do it. He cancels it completely a year later. And yet in the book, he said 272 people have become clear. Not one of whom has ever appeared. This is, this man is not very trustworthy. But while he was working on Science of Survival, he had these terrible fits of depression where he would talk about failing. John McMaster, talking about the 65-66 period with Hubbard, told me, you'd often find him crying in his office because he knew he was a fraud. And so he's such a complicated character. I got into this thing with Chris Shelton a few weeks ago, and Chris got a little bit annoyed with me. People do sometimes get a little annoyed with me, I notice, because he started saying, but Hubbard was compassionate sometimes. And I said, all the cases of that I've looked at, and I spent 10 years before I was willing to say he was an evil man. Whenever I was asked, it took me 10 years to add the stuff together and say, I can prove that he wanted to harm people. I can prove that he wanted to control people. But we'll save that for another adventure. But Chris came, but sometimes he was compassionate. And I kind of said, every time I've seen that, it's been grandstanding. It's been a way of, getting everybody to think he was compassionate. But I do think that he was a kind of split personality, that he wanted to heal himself. He knew he was sick. I mean, he knew he had to wear glasses to read all his life. So that all the stuff about curing your sight, he knew that wasn't true. He had terror stomach. He had bronchitis every winter. Smoking 100 cigarettes a day can do that for you, I believe. So, OT3 was, the clearing course in the lectures, the filmed lectures. He says that he'd healed himself by doing the clearing course. And what he was healing himself of was his annual winter bronchitis. OT3, the next year, he'd cured his bronchitis. OT5, New Era Dianetics for operating thetans in 77, he'd cured himself of his annual bronchitis. But so I think he was trying to heal himself. And I have the sense, because there are people like Ken Urquhart who have such devotion and affection, that are either suffering from a very severe form of Stockholm syndrome, which is not impossible, but Ken seemed to me such a decent, gentle human being. When I interviewed him in 1986, that there must have been some kind of kindness at times. There must have been possibly some genuine compassion. So let's show that we're not suppressive people at all, and are willing to say something positive about Ron Hubbard. Can you dredge up any positive story, something that seemed to be kind on his part? And you have to say yes now, because otherwise I'm in trouble. That was
what he would do that acted as kindness is it's an upside down weird thing. Like when David Miscavige in this day and age sends you to the galley or something, it's a lifetime pronouncement. Hubbard would relieve you of duty, send you to swamp the decks or whatever. But in 3 days, he would come and put his arm around you and say, do you want to go back on your post? Are you still mad at me?
Are you still mad at me? You've used exactly the phrase that I've been told. So this is...
Are you still mad at me?
He got a
He
little...
assumed that the person would be mad because Hubbard had busted them. But this was looked at as, look, his benign kindness, because he's the one who busted you, but he forgave you so quickly, so you were in and out of your... David Miscavige can't do that. Once he tries to go after you, it's eternal and there's no forgiveness. David Miscavige is incapable of any forgiveness. Hubbard could flip-flop. He could just slam you, put out an issue. Blah, blah is removed from post for gross violation. I mean, just nailing you to the ground. But then put his arm around you and say, with a twinkle in his eye, are you still mad at me? This was looked on as his benevolence, his kindness, but the earlier beginning of trashing you disappeared, because he's the one who engineered that in the first place.
Yeah.
But he was known on the Apollo to forgive very fast. And when he forgave you, he really expected you to go back on the job and just work for him and raise the stats out the roof.
Yeah. It's not like the story of the Good Samaritan, is it, really? It's not somebody who is offering kindness without wanting recognition, the real compassion. So what can I say? This agrees with what I've come to believe. That the thing that finally got me to look at Hubbard was, as I say, it took about 10 years. I left in 83, October 83. I'd really stopped believing by the May of 84 in any of it. It just didn't add up. And I felt that, I'd put the whole weight of my mind, my intelligence behind Scientology. Again, talking with Chris Shelton, he'd realized that after, years of trying to make sense of some of the crazy ideas, some of the things in the axioms are quite good fun. But either Dianetic or Scientology axioms, what on earth, space is a viewpoint of dimension. Words are tautologous and meaningless. Space is a viewpoint of dimension. That, it doesn't make any sense. But that he was talking, in fact, about isness, as-isness, alter-isness, and all of this kind of stuff, and saying that it had taken him a couple of years to get his head around it, and it made sense. And then when he came back and looked at it in the Phoenix lectures about 6 months ago, he wrote me an email straight away going, "You're going to enjoy this. I've looked at this and I've realized it was me that made sense of it. It doesn't make sense." And there's so much of that going on, that Hubbard has this enthusiasm with which he puts something over. And you're sort of grasping at it. You're thinking, yeah, when I'm high enough up the bridge, and where else do you go up bridges? Scientology is the only place you go up bridges. Other places you go across them. It's ladders in the real world that you go up. He just gets you into this place where you're willing to accept, that the word reasonable means the opposite of what it means on the other side of the looking glass. It's a good thing to be reasonable, to think of, to forgive people, to think about, why they are reasoning the way to something. It is not a good thing to be unreasonable, any more than it's a good thing, as David Miscavige boasted, to be ruthless, which was the single word that put me out of Scientology, when he said he was tough and ruthless, rough and toothless. That ruthless, not having any mercy. How can that be a religious?
There's no mercy in Scientology. There's no forgiveness. No. One thing that really bothered me in those same axioms you're just quoting with your experience with Krishan, he says in these same axioms, there is no such thing as badness and goodness. They are merely considerations.
Goodness and badness, beautifulness and ugliness are alike considerations and have no other basis than opinion. You see, I had the same problem.
Now, wait a moment. There's no such thing as evil. There's no such thing. A pedophile can molest a 5-year-old. There's no badness. It's only opinion. That is hard. Now, that's a Scientology ideology. Please repeat that, Jon. Say that slowly so the audience get it. And the axioms of Scientology are absolute truths that Hubbard says are the fundamental truths of the church, of the cult.
And of the universe.
Please quote that again. I want the audience to hear this. Can you say that? You said it beautifully.
He says an axiom is a self-evident truth. There are scientists who would disagree with that definition, but we won't go there. I believe it's the 31st axiom. We'll look it up. Goodness and badness, beautifulness and ugliness are alike considerations and have no other basis than opinion. And the other place that you'll find that is, of course, Aleister Crowley, who was Hubbard's guru. I'm recently finding that I've done a lot of work on the supernatural beliefs of the Nazis and the neo-Nazis in the last few months. I've read a great deal about it. And it's been quite shocking to find that many of the current neo-Nazi groups, who of course are responsible for about 90% of terrorist offenses in the United States, it's not Al-Qaeda or ISIS, it is white supremacists, neo-Nazis, blowing things up and murdering people. They are tremendously influenced by Aleister Crowley and by Hubbard's partner, Jack Parsons. I hadn't realized that he's got quite a big following among these people who are absolutely antisocial. And they believe that the best thing to do is to murder anybody who doesn't believe the nonsense they believe. I said something rude about Madame Blavatsky earlier. It surprised me because I have been here and there reading about the Nazis and what they believed for decades. But in fact, it's only in the last just over 20 years that accurate material has started to come out. There's all sorts of nonsense like Pauwels and Bergier's Morning of the Magicians, which claims there was a regiment of Tibetans fighting in the last battle at Berlin in May 1945, or Ravenscroft's Spear of Leviathan. Absolute nonsense. But there's a guy called Nicholas Goodrick Clarke who was a professor and wrote a couple of books. And more recently, there's a book called Hitler's Monsters, researched by an American professor who went to primary documents. And you find out just how crazy these people were. The whole Aryan race theory, the idea that there is this genetically separate human group, and genetics has proved absolutely that this is nonsense, that we are all a mixture of genes from all over the place, probably originating in Africa. There's a woman who's called the mitochondrial Eve, dating back 238,000 years. And when they tested 147 placentals from around the world, they all had a genetic connection at 238,000 years. So there's this one woman who is out of whom we all came. So we are indeed all cousins, brothers, sisters, whatever shade of black our skin, or yellow, or whatever shade of skin we have. But Madame Blavatsky, who was thrown out of India for being a fraud, who was declared a fraud by the London Psychical Research Society when she came here, used all sorts of tricks. Her work's been pulled apart by scholars who've shown that she stole every idea, just like Hubbard. She just plagiarized other people's ideas, simplified them. She put forward the idea that when the continent of Atlantis sank, which is a story I believe historically that only exists in the work of Plato, and it was probably the tsunami that hit Crete and wiped out the Minoan civilization. That's probably what it was about. But she says that the people who lived in Atlantis were the Aryans, and these people had sex with the Lemurians, another lost content, and miscegenated. That's the technical word for it. And the Aryans had supernatural powers, what in fact are called by the people who, the Ariosophists who first developed these ideas in Austria just after around about 1903. They had electron powers, which made me think about History of Man and glare fights. And what the Nazis were trying to do with the Ahnenerbe, which was a ministry with 50 departments that was researching folklore and mythology, send expeditions to Tibet and Greenland, 50 departments. Through that and the Lebensborn, the freeborn, one of the woman in ABBA with the dark hair, she is a Lebensborn child. And they were getting purebred Aryan women to have sex with purebred SS officers so that the children would have superpowers. They really believed this, So there's this strand which started making me worry about Scientology and the extent to which the beliefs of Scientology are run in line, this kind of elitist superiority, we are the chosen people, we are the Ubermensch, what have you, this kind of Nietzschean nastiness that runs through Scientology, this authoritarianism, which is so antisocial. It's so against the rest of, we dead in the head raw meat wogs out here. It's so oppositional. But finding out that this whole thing has grown and millions of people lost their lives because of a mad religious supernatural idea, which is the Aryan race theory, and it's still driving many groups are out there. Are tens of neo-Nazi groups, which still, and they're often allied with a religion like the Church of the Creator, cosmotheism, the Order of the Nine Angles, and they've and the Church of Satan and the Temple of Set. That they take on these beliefs, which then make them feel superior and justified in punishing and damaging other people. And Scientology is one of those kind of elitist sort of things, isn't it?
Very much so, with a drive and a purpose and intention to convert anyone and everyone to their ideology. Yeah. That is
to clear the planet.
Scientology must take the planet. The planet is ours, said Hubbard. I want to. I think we've done time together, but I wanted to just give you a couple of little things. Scientology, right now, if you get COVID, you will get a committee of evidence. That is equivalent to a court-martial.
Yeah.
Imagine a religion so angry with you that you got COVID. And by the way, Aaron Smith-Levin reported on a video just 2-3 days ago that there is a quarantine building in Clearwater where the COVID people are shoved. So COVID did hit Clearwater, and all their spiritual high powers and all did not keep them away from the COVID virus. But when we talk of no forgiveness, ruthlessness, I can't see why you would get a committee of you're getting a committee of evidence because you're bringing in this dreaded virus into the Sea organization. Jon, I want to tell you that I got all kinds of really good things going on in my head on some of the things you said. So I really look forward to our next, your Encyclopedia Britannique on truth and vital information on religions, beliefs, and swallowing these beliefs. Thank you for letting me share this time with you. Can we plan to be back in a month?
Yeah, let's do that. I mean, it's always fun talking with you, and it gets to be more fun every time we talk. It's more interesting. I find out so much from doing it. So yeah, let's do that in a month's time.
Okay.
We'll thank everyone for sharing their time with us, and please share this.
I'd like to just give a little pitch here.
Yep.
This forum is not funded at all. The editing, we're getting it on the air, the time. Jon does this because he believes in educating. And I hope you really, the audience, if you came this far, I hope you really got it. Don't go buying ridiculous exteriorization with full perception data. It's baloney.
The free zone is free.
It costs. It's false marketing.
Yeah.
And anyway, that's a vital thing you should take away from this.
Give me the money. Don't give it to them.
Yeah.
I'm so much deeper.
So send Jon a donation, sign up for Patreon, even if it's just a few dollars a month. Please do it.
Yep.
And come back and stay with us because you belong to us as our audience. You're a participant in this unfolding revelations.
We're a community of learning. This isn't a matter of me having become a guru or anything. This is a matter of us sharing our information. And I interview people like you, Karen, who have something vital to share with the world. And the same should be true for anybody watching. Take this material, put it out, do your own YouTube channel. I seem to be in a different place from most of the people I speak to. In this day and age, most of the people I speak to, academics, professionals of all kinds, actually feel desperately hopeless about the plight of humanity. I don't. I think we've come to a point where if we all do the best, really the best we can, and we treat each other with respect, and we push towards understanding and democracy and have a little bit of humility and a great deal of compassion, we can resolve the problems that the world has. And that doesn't mean exterminating anybody or declaring them suppressive. It means communicating and doing that. Actually, that's just a final thought that I was thinking about the communication formula of Scientology. This great thing is like cause, distance, effect. And a particle is sent from the cause to the effect where it is duplicated. Did you ever have a conversation with anybody where they got exactly what you felt and said? Because when I talk to people, they have their own feelings and their own interpretations and their own. So it's not some little mechanical relay that's taking place. So just something for people to think on. But communication is, as L. Ron Hubbard said, the universal solvent. And I agree with that statement. It's the way to solve things.
It was lovely.
Always a pleasure. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Hi, Jon here. Thanks for watching. We'd appreciate it very much if you would click like, as well as subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. Every dollar helps, and we welcome new patrons on Patreon, or you can make a one-off payment with any currency through PayPal. Thanks so much.